Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the managing partner of Scott Legal. And today we are going to go through the EB-5 program and give you information on everything you need to know about EB-5, both from the perspective of regional center and direct investment. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Scott Legal is a full-service immigration firm, but we do specialize in investor-based visas like E2, EB-5, and other investor-based green cards and non-immigrant visa options. We do hold webinars fairly regularly. Once we're done with the webinar, we do send a number of things to you. One thing we'll send is a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that you'll see on the screen. We'll also send a link where you can see this video. Again, it'll be on our YouTube learning channel, and you can subscribe to that channel so that you will see other videos that come up quite regularly on interesting immigration topics. We'll send you a guide, an EB-5 guide, so you'll have that. So it'll have a lot more information on EB-5, the EB-5 program and the requirements. And we'll also send you a link where you can set up a consultation with us if you have specific questions. We will have questions or time for questions in the webinar as well. So we encourage you to add your questions to either the chat function or the Q&A function, and we will be happy to get to them at the appropriate point. So let's just jump right into the presentation then, and we're first going to start talking about regional centers and direct investments, and really what a profile of each of these the people who are interested in this program, what a profile would look like for these particular people. So a regional center, first let's describe what they are. So a regional center is the EB-5 program that deals with, let's say, for example, that there's a hotel like a Hilton chain and they want to raise $100 million, and they're going to use the EB-5 program to get capital and get investors to invest $800,000 each until they reach their $100 million target. And they're going to structure the program so that it meets the EB-5 requirements so that the investor can get the green card. So that particular investor is going to be someone who is really interested in a very passive form of investment. The Hilton chain in this case would be the one that's doing everything, investing, buying, spending, building, creating jobs, really doing everything, where the investor would just invest their money and wait for the green card. So that profile really is somebody who is, really wants the passive form of investment. The administration fees for these are quite high. They could be $30,000 to $50,000, maybe even more. And the return is usually low. Once you factor in the administrative fees, the return usually would be a negative return. So really, this is something where people are just looking to get the green card. They're not doing it because, even though it is an investment, you have to keep in mind that it is investment just like any other investment. You could lose all your money and not get a green card. But the people are not really thinking of it as an investment, but rather thinking of it as how it can be utilized to get the green card. Now, the direct investment, on the other hand, might be someone who maybe is here on an E2 visa, has, started a gym, for example, and then they want to invest more money in the gym and expand the gym and create the requisite number of jobs. And they are a person who wants the control over their own money. They don't want to give it to somebody else. They don't want to limit the return, etc. So they do this on their own. And that is, their profile. So I think this is definitely much more of an entrepreneur profile. They're looking for higher return, and they're looking to be the ones who drive the process. So the requirements are very similar when you look at regional center or direct investment in terms of once we move into the crux of the requirements. But I think that the profiles of the investor and, quite frankly, what has to be done if someone's doing a regional center, they really, for the most part, just have to invest the money and then prove where the money came from. If they're doing direct investment, then there's a lot more that the actual investor themselves would have to do. So the crux of the requirements here are investment. EB-5 requires you to invest, and we're going to get into the details of that. Create jobs, and then do the filing, right? And we're going to go into the detail of all of that. So the investment, let's start with that. So you're required to invest either $800,000 or $1,050,000. And what this really is getting at is, or the difference here is where the particular business is located. So if the business is located in what's called a targeted employment area, and that can be defined as an area where the unemployment rate is at least 1.5 times the national average, or an area that is a rural area then the amount that's going to be invested is 800,000. But if not, all of the other ones are 1,050,000. And this does become important, especially depending on where you're born. But we'll talk about that in a little bit later. It doesn't have to be a new business. The statute says new commercial enterprise, but that's going to be an enterprise that was created after 1990. So there is some flexibility. You could have an existing business and then you go to invest in that particular business, and that could still work for EB-5. You will see that all of the regional centers will be 800,000 because they will be structuring themselves to do the lower investment amount. So they will be structuring themselves so they are in targeted employment areas. That's obviously not going to be guaranteed when when you invest. It's something that you want to definitely investigate and make sure that you are, make sure that that it actually will be. But based on their best knowledge and belief at the time, they do want people to invest in the $800,000. And one of the reasons is because those lower investment projects have a lot more advantages with respect to getting the green card quickly if you were born in India or China. So, and as I said, we'll talk about that in a little bit, in a little bit. The investment can be made over time. So when I say it can be made over time, you should make the investment before you apply, but the investment doesn't have to all be made at once. So let's say that you are doing a direct investment and you had an E2 business and then you invested $800,000, $100,000 each year. That's fine as long as you come to the $800,000. So the one thing is that investment is going to be money that is in your, money that you have possession and control of, money that's in your personal possession. It's not going to be money that the company accumulates over time. It's going to be money that is in your control, and that so it's not going to just be retained earnings. The other thing is that there are many things that cannot be included in investment that are maybe in other, like E2, you can include legal fees and administrative fees. But if for the EB-5, like if you're investing $800,000, you in addition to that would have to pay the legal fees separate from that, and then you would also have to pay the administrative fees. For example, if you're doing a regional center, you'd have to pay the administrative fees separate from that as well. Very big difference between EB-5 and E2, the source of funds. For EB-5, they both have a requirement where you have to show where the money came from, but when you're looking at it in the EB-5 context, it really is more like an audit. It really is quite interesting in the sense of you have to have both a trail of funds and where the money came from, and it really is quite extensive. It's interpreted, I think, much stricter than even the way that the wording of the statute. But definitely that's going to be the focus for regional center. That's almost the entire focus, because as long as you have a reputable regional center, the thing that we're looking at most is where the money came from, the source of funds. But if it's direct investment, then it's going to be source of funds plus the other aspects to make sure that you are complying with everything. The investment does have to be an equity investment, so you can't say that, okay, I'm going to give a loan to a particular company and they're going to pay me back. It does have to be equity, so it does have to be at risk. The situation has to be that you could lose the investment, and you can't have anything in the contract that kind of says that you have a guaranteed return or that you will get any of your money back, like return in terms of yearly or monthly return, or that you get any of your money back. The money has to be completely at risk. The jobs creation. So the big other part of this, we just talked about the investment. A big other part of this is creating jobs. You have to create 10 full-time jobs, so not part-time jobs. We don't even like to do, there's something called shared job. We don't like that. It's very difficult to document, but so we say full-time jobs, and they have to be people that are US citizens or green card holders. So you should, if you're, especially if you're in the direct investment program, you should really make sure that you are subscribing to E-Verify or those platforms that check employment verification, because they're very particular about this, right? So people, if they give you false documentation related to their ability to work in the US, then that's going to be your problem, not theirs, when it comes to the time of removing the conditions. The difference between one big difference between direct investment and regional center is that if you do direct investment, the jobs have to be, jobs that you create specifically, but regional centers can rely on knock-on effects. Like, let's say that there's a hotel that's going up, and then as a result of that, there are dry cleaners, restaurants, and other things that are going to be going up in the area. Then an economist can do an economist report to look at the indirect jobs that came from that, and those can count towards the 10 jobs that are needed per applicant. The business plan is always going to be part of this, whether it's a regional center or a direct investment. I think if it's a direct investment, it's going to be more important because you're going to need to show that who it is you plan on hiring, when you plan on hiring them, and you always want to make sure, as I said, document that the full-time workers are qualified. In terms of what is filed, there's a petition called I-526. And the I-526 is a petition. It's either I-526 or I-526E. It's a petition that goes over you've invested the money, you have a plan to create the jobs. So it's the first step in the process. And then, depending on whether you're in the United States or outside the United States, you're going to either file an I-485 or do consular processing. Both of those can only be done if the category is current. So if for all of the investments where the amount is 800,000, they're all current for every single country. But if you go to the 1,050,000 and you're from China or India, those categories are not current. So there could be long waits. And that's why people push really to do the indirect investment, sorry, not indirect, the lower investment so that they can actually qualify if they're from one of those countries. And then 2 years after you get the green card, you need to file an I-829 petition to remove the conditions. So the program, and this really just relates to the regional center program, the direct investment program, it doesn't have to be reauthorized, so it's not really ever changed. So that's not something that you have to be concerned with on the direct side. But in 2022, there were significant changes that were made to the program. Part of the one change was the investment amount. The investment amount was 500,000 for the lower end before. It went to 800,000. The higher end didn't go up much. It was 1 million and it went up to 1,050,000. The program's been authorized till 2027, which is good, gives some clarity. And then also, if you invest in the regional center program and you file your petition before September 30th, 2026, the government will adjudicate it. And this was a big problem when the program was having difficulties being reauthorized last time, where petitions were in limbo. The TA rules, it's definitely harder to say that something is in one of those other areas, but before it was maybe abused a little bit, so this change is not too bad. And then the big thing is that they set aside carve-outs for rural areas, high unemployment areas, and infrastructure projects. And what this allowed is for, this was a significant change, because what it allowed for is individuals to have their category current, like for example, India, China, etc., when the project fell into one of these areas. And that, really put these people ahead of the line, the people who invested after 2022, it put them ahead of the line. Another significant change in 2022 was that the government allowed the filing of an I-485 petition concurrently with an I-526 as long as the category was current. In the past, the I-526 had to be approved. And given the I-526 petition can take 4 to 5 years sometimes to be approved, that was a problem, and it wasn't that encouraging for people to start the process because they didn't get any immigration benefit until the petition was approved. But now they can actually get immigration benefit. They can stay in the United States. They can apply for work authorization, apply for travel authorization as well. The other change was source of funds. They said that although the source of funds, although legal fees can't be used in the 800,000, they said that they do want to see that the source of funds related to the legal fees have been documented as well. And there was some talk about changing the rules so that you couldn't have certain types of gifts, but that none of those rules changed. So they were, that was all good. And then the other thing that changed is that sometimes, like if something happened to a regional center through no fault of the investor, in the past there was no ability to do anything about it. So now there is some basis where you can transfer to another regional center, et cetera. Another thing to consider, especially when you're doing the direct investment, is that the investment does have to be at risk. So you can't just take, let's say, $800,000 and put the money in a business bank account and then apply for the EB-5. You would actually have to spend some of it or have commitments to spend before you actually could apply. So it's not just the intent to invest that is required. You actually do have to invest. You wouldn't have to spend the full 800 or 1,050,000, but you should spend some with commitments for the rest. We talked about loans and gifts already. The other thing to consider is that we get a lot of people who set up consults and say, hey, I want to buy a business for $800,000. The business already has 10 full-time employees. Can I do that and apply for an EB-5? And the answer is no. The investment has to be used to create the job. So those jobs have already been created. So if you did use that money and bought that particular company, it still could be EB-5 eligible, but you need to create 10 more jobs and you have to invest another $800,000 into that business to be able to make that eligible. And we talked about you can't have guaranteed returns. And E2, there's when you're moving from E2, one good thing is that there's no nationality requirement anymore because E2 only is available to people from certain countries. So let's say somebody has investors that have invested in their company and they're no longer have 50% ownership, they could still apply for the EB-5. They do have to look very closely at the investment that was made in the job creation to see when the timing as well, because you'd have to say, okay, well, money came into the company that was invested and it created X jobs. And we talked about buying a business. So other considerations that you should be aware of, timing considerations, the EB-5 takes a long time to be adjudicated. It takes sometimes 4 to 5 years to be adjudicated, in their country-specific quotas that make it so that some people have longer waits than others. So that's something. And then when you're in the United States, you do have to kind of look at travel considerations. Like if sometimes you have to make sure that you're keeping your underlying basis of a visa so that you especially given these long waits. And then sometimes if your visa is a non-immigrant visa and doesn't have dual intent, like a TN visa or an E2 visa, then you do have to worry about that because it might be that you have issues with respect to the adjustment status process. If you have an L visa or an H-1B visa, it's going to be a little easier because you can still come and go and have the intent to adjust status. And a lot of time people have parallel green card strategies. Sometimes they do EB-5 and they get married to a U.S. citizen, and that's going to be faster. Or they do EB-5, and we'd had one EB-5 case that we did, and the person subsequently did a national interest waiver petition, and that was approved. But really, planning is key here. So those were all my prepared remarks. And I do see a number of questions. So I'm going to go to the questions and I'm going to read them and then answer them. So let me just do that here. Okay. So the first question is, when EB-5 investors are able to transfer with family in the US when they get the visa. So I don't fully understand the question, but let me just describe a few scenarios. So if the EB-5 investor is in the United States already, then the family and the category is current, then the family can file along with the EB-5 investor for their I-485s. And if they're not, if they're doing consular processing, the family can join in that process with getting the green cards at the consulate. EB-5 direct investors can be 49% or need to be 50%. So EB-5 doesn't have a percentage. The percentage of ownership or equity can be even a fractional percentage. It's only E2 that has a percentage that's required of 50 or more. EB-5 investors can be silent partners for direct investment. They can, but you have to be careful because it can't be a passive investment, even though the regional center is passive. But the way that the documents are worded, it does say that they have some voting ability that satisfies the passive aspect. So you do have to work very closely with a lawyer to make sure that the wording in the contract satisfies the EB-5 requirements. EB-5 investors can invest in an ALF senior facility or memory care center. Yes, the answer is yes. You can invest in any business. Can my business partner set up all business requirements and business plan and run the business before you're in the? Yes, certainly. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That's no problem. Last question is 800,000 okay for health services like AIFC? Yeah, we don't really know like in terms of how much businesses cost to get set up and things like that. So definitely work with a broker, but keep in mind you can't buy a business. So this is all going to be starting, and we don't help people find projects. No, you can Google different regional centers, and what I look for in a regional center is a regional center that's been around for a long time, so that they've returned people's money, etc. When profits are distributed to an investor but not immediately transferred to their U.S. account, what level of documentation is required to prove these funds were actually received by the investor? So it is going to be a trail. Like, so if you had money that was sent to a business, then you have to show where that money came from. Like, let's say it was, from tax returns from the business showing. Now, if it sat in an account for a while, then you have to kind of get all those bank statements lined up, showing that the money stayed in that account. And then once it was transferred out, you'd need the bank statements for that as well. So it is quite an exercise, the EB-5 program is definitely not for the faint of heart when it comes to the source of funds requirements. So perfect. And I think that is it for the questions. Let me just make sure. Yeah, that is it for the questions. Oh, there's one more. Just one sec. Okay, if account statements or SWIFT transfers don't list the individual's name clearly, what supplemental evidence will be given? Well, it depends. It depends what there is, right? So what you're trying to do is provide credible evidence to the government related to what's going on. So it could be that the statements, like if there's some other statement from the other side that shows the exact same transfer or something, but it really just depends what is going on. But what can't be done though is just the general statement that I can't get anything, right? Because because they can issue an RFE asking for information, and you can't kind of say that sorry, I don't have anything. So it could be other information, that whatever information there is to prove that what you're saying is accurate and true. So perfect. So thank you very much again. We appreciate you joining the webinar, and we will send a number of different things to you. So, for example, the PowerPoint presentation, the link to set up a consult, the link to join our YouTube channel, and the EB-5 guide. And look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you.